Hey everybody, and welcome back to a brand new video. So our game is coming along really well. We now have score, we now have lives being taken, and now we need a way to basically show all of that information into our UI. So in this video, we're essentially going to be starting with our UI and setting up some of those things, okay? So now, first of all, if you navigate to your resources folder under sprites, these are the sort of UI things that we will be using. This will be your life. This will be once you have, essentially lost a life, then you will see an empty heart there. And you will be using this sort of icon here, which is we're going to be using it as a score display and so on and so forth. So let's just go ahead and get into it. Alright, so in order to create UI elements, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here in my hierarchy, I'm going to right click, I'm going to go on UI, and I'm going to click on image, okay? Now as soon as I click on image, it creates this image and it's super zoomed in, which is why it looks all white. If I switch over to my game view, I can see that this image is being drawn here on top of my world. Anyway, so we are going to go ahead and use this image. What we can do is if you look here in the inspector on the right hand side, it tells you the position, the X, Y, and Z position. So for example, if I hit 0, 0, 0, it becomes completely in the center. I can change the width of this and I can make it longer, wider, so on and so forth. Alright, so now that we have our image, essentially we need to put in actual sprite inside this image. The way we can do this is we can drag and drop any of these sprites here into this image slot. Now one thing I want to mention, and this is something that I probably should have mentioned earlier on, but all of these sprites, we want to make sure that when we click on them over here in the texture type, it says sprite 2D and UI, okay? So when you first drag and drop and import them into the scene, sometimes they're going to be set as default. Since I was dragging and dropping them from a previous Unity project, they were already set to sprite 2D and UI. So I apologize if there was any sort of confusion earlier on, but it should not have mattered at that point. And since we're going to be using them as UI sprites, then this is going to be an important one. So what you can do is you can essentially select all of these sprites and you can just directly go and change them to sprite 2D and UI, and at the bottom here you want to hit apply, okay? So once you've gone ahead and done that, if you hadn't already, if you go back to our image, I can go ahead and drag and drop this heart in its place and ta-da, it shows up over here like so. Okay, so what I want to do is I want these hearts all the way here nicely aligned in this left corner, okay? Now the way I can do this is first of all, I want them to be a little bit smaller than what they are currently. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to make them 50 by 50, which I think is a far more reasonable size, and this is really up to you. Next, what I want to do is I want to set an anchor, okay? If I click here on this little sort of crosshair type thing, if I click on this, notice how it changes the anchor over here. And if I hold down shift and if I click on this, then it basically sets the center point and the anchors into that little left corner. Okay, now if I go and essentially hit 0, 0, and 0, it places my heart automatically at the very edge of the screen. Okay, so that's what anchors are essentially used for. If I now change the anchor to the right, and if I hold down shift and if I click on it, it's going to automatically change the anchor, and it's changing the position of the image essentially with respect to its anchor position. So notice how it's minus 472, and if I zero this out, it's going to anchor all the way to the right side like it's supposed to. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and move this over here to the left side. And the next thing I want to do is I want to maybe move it down a little bit. So I'm going to go in my scene view here and let's see, I want something like, let's see, this looks good, and maybe something like so. And I think this looks pretty decent. Now, what do I want to do now? Well, first of all, what I want to do is I want to have, when we lose the life, I want to show an empty sort of a heart to show that we in fact lost a life. So what I want to do is I want to create another sort of UI image, and the way I'm going to do this is I'm just going to duplicate this one, okay? So I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate this one, and in the second one I can easily just throw in this heart empty source image. Okay, so now if you go in your scene view, and if I disable this first image, then you will end up with this one, and if you enable it, you will end up with that one. So it's basically one image on top of the other. So that is looking good. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and label them. So this is going to be part 1, and this is going to be frame 1, okay? And this is going to be frame 1. And what I can now do is I can go ahead and select both of these and duplicate them. And I can just sort of kind of move them over. And again, I'm not going to be too meticulous about this at the moment, but you can make sure that everything is nice and smooth. But you get what I mean. So if I switch over to my game view, I can kind of see them placed nice and well over here, like so. Okay, switching back to my scene view, I can, let's see, let me go ahead and tweak them a little bit, and I can go ahead and rename them. So this is going to be Heart 2, and this is going to be Frame 2, and Part 3, and Frame 3. Okay, so that part of our UI is looking pretty decent. What I now want to do is I want to have a high score, or a scored display, sort of an image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and copy one of these hearts. I'm going to paste it. I'm going to rename it as score icon. And what I'll do is I can drag this over here. Granted, I know that the image is incorrect, so let's just quickly fix that. I can drag and drop this one here. It's called My Zombie Head, and this is going to be my high score image, okay? The reason why it's looking a little bit pixelated is probably because the scale was off, so you want to go ahead and make sure the scale is at 1. And let's switch back to our scene view, and let's move it here in the right. Now, since this is going to be in the right, I'll go ahead and anchor this, in fact, to the right, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and click on this. This changes the anchor, and I can go ahead and zero it out. And also, since I don't want it to be outside, I'm going to go ahead and hold down Shift, and I'm going to go ahead and click on that again, and then readjust that, okay? So the reason why I hold down Shift is simply because it moves the sort of pivot point onto this edge. Otherwise, the icon or the UI actually goes out of the window of our viewport, okay? So now we have it all the way in the very corner. Obviously, I don't want that, but we can just tweak that as per our own, you know, whatever it is that we want. So let's see, maybe not so much, so maybe a little bit like so. And let's see, maybe a little bit like so. Okay, so now we have our sort of score. So now what I need is I need my scored text. I'm going to move this just a little bit more since it's kind of, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to need a text box now, and the way we can do that is we can right click on canvas, we can go on UI, and we can click on text. Okay, once again, if I double click this in my scene view, it shows up here, and if you look for it here in the scene, it shows up here. I want to move this all the way over here. And so the way I'm going to do this is naturally I'm going to anchor it in the top right, and that will be a good way to start. So I'm going to anchor it and Shift and 0, 0, 0, and now I have text over here. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and name this score text. So we'll call this score text. And we can just to get an idea, I'm going to write 99 here. Since the black color is not really coming out so much, let's change the color to white so that it stands out a little bit. And also what I'm going to do is, if you remember, we can still use the these buttons here and try and sort of essentially change the scale and so on and so forth. So what I'm going to first of all do is I'm going to first of all center this score inside of the text box, and I'm going to essentially make the size small. So I click on the adjustment rectangle tool, and I'm going to make it like so. And now I will use essentially the move tool and I'll bring it down like so. Now that I have done that, I want to, let's see, the score looks a little bit small, so let's go ahead and bump up the text. So let's say something like 36. But now that I did that, it seems like the box was too small. So I'm going to go ahead and come over here. I'm going to go on the rect tool. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Okay, and let's go ahead and try and make it like so. Okay, it's looking good so far. Maybe a little bit too big, but that's okay. Also, what I want to do is I want to make it bold so that it just stands out a little bit. And lastly, what I want is for the text just to kind of pop and have like an outline on it. And there's a Unity component, and I can just go ahead and add that on. So I'm going to click on outline here, and that sort of just gives me this unique sort of outline. And I'll stick with a black color for now. And I think this looks good for now. Guys, so that is pretty much going to be most of our UI. Now, of course, if I hit play now, obviously nothing happens because we haven't programmatically attached any of these. But I think just taking the time out and setting everything else up is a really good sort of starting point. So in the next video, we're going to be talking about how we are essentially going to be actually removing these hearts from our UI and also updating the score. Okay, so thank you so much, guys, and I will see you in the next video.